Joining us now is Susan Harley, who is Deputy Director of the Congress Watch program at Public Citizen. She is also the editor of a fascinating new report called Mission Creepy. That's the title. Subtitle: Google is quietly becoming one of the nation's most powerful political forces while expanding its information collection empire. This subject is right up our alley, and we're glad to have her. Susan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, your subtitle says that Google is becoming one of the nation's most powerful political forces, but I also got the sense reading the report, which is fascinating reading, by the way, and we should give a shout out to Sam Jeweler who wrote it, but I also got the sense reading it that Google may be the biggest corporate lobbyist in America now.
That is correct. So as of 2014, just at the beginning of November, they had spent over $13 million, surpassing Dow, General Electric, some of the other large corporations in the nation, and they're on pace to hit $18.2 million lobbying by the end of this year.
Now, those are huge numbers, and I guess they're numbers that they're not taking any particular effort to hide. You could probably Google them, as a matter of fact, but I guess the question is, they're not going. A lot of corporations launder or hide or obscure their lobbying activity through the United States Chamber of Commerce or someone else, but Google apparently isn't worried about the fact that the public might find out it's such a huge corporate lobbyist.
That's true, although to say this is only their recorded lobby spending, which is required under the Lobby Disclosure Act if you're, kind of doing it directly as your own entity. But that is a really important point, that Google gives an undisclosed amount of money to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as a number of other electioneering groups that, lobby on its behalf. And so that is a huge problem, that dark money, that we have zero idea the size and nature of those types of donations.
So it's spending tens of millions of dollars to influence government policy that we know of, and probably spending more. And was Google part of the Koch brothers American Legislative Exec, or whatever it's called, ALEC group? Were they also part of that at one point?
Yes, and that's actually something that they have just recently, as of the past several weeks, denounced their association with ALEC. And so, we believe that is, very good news, and hopefully they will soon, get out of other organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
We are talking with Susan Harley about a new report on Google's lobbying activities and information gathering activities entitled Mission Creepy. And so they backed out of the ALEC program after public pressure. So maybe their motto should be "Don't be evil and get caught at it." But having said that, let's pivot for a second, before we pivot to the information collection part, because this is a very good report and I want people to read it. But before we do we have any sense of what Google is out there lobbying for, what policies it wants?
Well, we didn't include in the report information on their federal lobbying, but we do get into some of the lobbying that they're doing at the state level. So that's another area that is separate from that spending that I mentioned earlier. That amount, 13 plus million is only on federal lobbying. So at the state level, we have examples listed in the report where they are going in on things like distracted driving or texting while driving, really in the way to pave the way for self-driving cars. That automatic driving car is something that they're really looking to do. And so we have an example in there of an aggressive lobbying by Google in the state of Nevada, and Nevada became the first state kind of after that push to officially approve self-driving cars. So they're out there. They're also looking at things like use of their Google Glass while driving, and again, a lot of it's around this automatic car.
Because what could go wrong? And by the way, I did a little digging into that Nevada situation myself, and I'm sure you guys have more information on it. But one of the things that became clear is that The self-driving car passed its initial tests after Google engineers picked the route in advance, and they had all sorts of rules, right? Limitations of their engineers had to be in the car, their engineers had to take over the car a couple times. So it's not the kind of test that a 16-year-old would have passed to get her learner's permit.
Well, that, as you mentioned before, I was one of the editors. So Sam Jeweler really looked into some of those specifics as he was writing the report. But yeah, the limitations of the automatic self-driving cars are definitely out there. Some of them are listed, just the fact that it needs to have in advance the map, and something like a new traffic light will confuse it. And so it really isn't prepared to drive on the vast majority of the roads. But that's not stopping Google from getting into the states and making sure that there won't be, laws hindering them, when the cars are, quote unquote, ready to be on the road.
Yeah, and if it can't react to a new traffic light, it can't react to a person who's fainted in a crosswalk either. So I don't happen to be, as you can tell, a big fan of, I think it's just been overhyped, the whole self-driving car thing. And also, by the way, I don't really want Google knowing where I'm driving, which gets me to which is my way of transitioning to the other aspect of your report at Public Citizen, which is about Google, which is the information gathering. I mean, obviously the report has been entitled Mission Creepy, so it's sending a clear message that there's kind of something creepy about what Google's doing. And what is that?
Well, what is, I think, not known to the average user of Google's products, or even, say ads generally, is that Google is now able to track usage across platforms. So, combining information from your Gmail account, from your use of Google Drive or some of their spreadsheet functions, from Google Maps, interacting on ads. They put all of that together, and then they're able to, track all of your usage. And so that's all kind of plainly written in their privacy statement that, kind of whatever product you're using, we're going to combine that information. And so, that was kind of where it started to escalate. And then where they're going now is buying new types of technology. And so things like Nest home thermostat systems, or Skybox, which is satellite imaging. And so now, these are ways to tell when people are home, or, new products, new areas, going in onto people's bodies with Google Glass, or, the kind of next thing they're going to be doing are Google Smart Contact Lenses. So they're, kind of buying up a lot of products so that, again, they can combine that information across platforms.
Well, now there are people who say, and I agree that it's kind of a terrifying prospect, but a lot of people say, and we're talking with Susan Harley of Public Citizen Congress Watch, there are a lot of people who say, well, so what? I have nothing to hide. That's always the answer you get. I'm getting free services from Google, and I don't care if they know everything about me. And what's your answer to that?
Some people definitely have less fear of folks kind of looking in on their private communications. But what I think is, one of the areas that is very troubling about the way Google has acted in the past is that there have been clear violations of public trust, and at least allegations of that, and findings that would show that. They had the largest civil penalty settlement with the Federal Trade Commission because they found a way around getting around Safari browsers, lack of putting cookies on people's systems. So they kind of tricked the browser into laying down these cookies and tracking people's activities. And even worse, they had apps for education, which was being used in classrooms across the nation. Kids were entering information onto these applications, and that was being tracked without their consent. They also had their Street View cars kind of going around the world detailed mapping and getting that kind of street level photographs. And while they had those cars out there, they were sucking up people's Wi-Fis if they weren't encrypted and taking information like Social Security numbers, passwords, and, kind of just making the argument that, it's out there on the airwaves, we're going to, use it. And so I think that's where we need to be extra vigilant in making sure that, their policies moving forward don't, take people's information if they have not consented by using their products.
And we have, we're talking with Susan Harley of Public Citizen Congress Watch about Google. We also have the fact, for example, that their former CEO, I believe he's former CEO now, Eric Schmidt, I believe he has a different position with the company now, but has said basically that privacy is over. Don't expect to have privacy. So I guess the question then is, the other element of this is Google, the NSA, and Google's relationship with the government. And do we really even know the extent to which certainly Google's objected, as the technology companies have in the past, to certain specific search requests or whatever. But do we really know? We've covered stories of increasing relationship between military and ex-military folks in Google. Do we really know what they're doing with all this information?
One of the things that's clear after reading this report is no one knows exactly how much information Google has except for Google. I don't think the government even has an idea, but what is we're seeing is that there's a really big loophole in the requirement for a warrant for getting people's information, like wiretapping, if the government is going to a company like Google. And so they have, under subpoena authority, been able to get information from Google. They turn it right over. And so there is some information about how many requests per year Google is getting from government for that information. But, it's a pretty big loophole in a constitutionally protected right, for us to have some privacy. And so, NSA has what Google has, but maybe not all of it.
Yeah, so, and basically whenever that much data about that many people, so comprehensive about their lives, is in one place, it just becomes very easy for someone to sweep it, someone to collect it surreptitiously, government or non-government, someone to abuse it, someone to misuse it. So your report has done a great service for the country in enlightening people on this issue. We've been talking with Susan Harley, Deputy Director of Public Citizens Congress Watch, about the new report, Mission Creepy, Google becoming one of the most powerful political forces and collecting all sorts of scary information. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.